1, 2. Simkin. Who hates Simkin? She hates Simkin. He hates Simkin. I hate Simkin. You hate Simkin. She hates Simkin. We hate Simkin. Who hates Simkin? I hate Simkin. They hate Simkin.
Hello, everybody. This is Jonathan Simkin, aka 604 Simkin. But we thought just as something fun to do, we're going to look at some of the plaques that we've received over the years for acts that we have had either signed to the label or before the label when I was a lawyer. I'm still a lawyer, but when that's all I did, you know, I used to get plaques if I represented bands who did well. You know, it's a funny music business thing. When an album sells a certain amount of records, it's deemed to be a gold record or it's deemed to be a platinum record. And just to tell you something about sort of how the music business has been since I started 30 years ago, when I first started in Canada, a gold record was 50,000 units and a platinum record was 100,000 units. At a certain point in time, maybe 10 years ago, they revised that downwards just because sales weren't what they once were. So now in Canada, a gold record is 40,000 records and a platinum record is 80,000 records. So interesting. You know, they had to sort of reduce it by 20%. And it's probably still much harder to get now than it was when I first started. That's a whole nother story. So I think we're just going to dive into it, and I'm just going to do a bit of an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And you know what? Why don't we start with this? A gold record, I believe, for the Tug of War album by Carly Rae Jepsen. There's Carly looking like she's gazing into the sun or something. I don't know what she's looking at. And this one evokes a lot of memories. So Tug of War was Carly's first album, and it was recorded after she had finished her run on Canadian Idol. Carly came in third on Canadian Idol. When I first met Carly, it was probably within 6 months of her, you know, coming in third. She contacted me. I want to say she contacted me because of Marianas Trench. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like she was a fan of Marianas Trench and maybe tracked down who managed them, and I managed them, still do. She contacted me, and I remember having a meeting with her and her father and another guy who I co-managed her with initially. And so we had a meeting out at this other guy's house in Deep Cove, and it was very casual. And I remember going into the meeting pretty skeptical. And the reason I went into that meeting skeptical was because I really wasn't a fan of the Canadian Idol series, but I wasn't really expecting much. I'd maybe viewed a couple of her Idol clips. Like I think there's a clip of her auditioning and there was a couple of clips of her performances. And I was like, okay, she can sing. She's attractive. She seems charming when they interview her. Yeah, what the hell, I'll take the meeting. But I really wasn't expecting that I was going to end up working with her. And so we have the meeting. And I liked her. She was intelligent. I think she still is intelligent. And funny. And driven. You could tell she was very ambitious. And I remember at some point kind of saying like, you know, Carly, so much here to like. I said, you know, I like you. You've got a beautiful voice. You seem very intelligent. You're cute as a button. Like, hey, there's a lot to like here. I said, but I really like to work with people who write their own music. And I said, it's partly a financial thing, but it's mostly just my own sense of, what turns me on in the music business. When I was a kid and I first fell in love with music, the first band I ever really, really fell in love with was a band called The who amazingly are still around and actually in the middle of their finale tour. Like that's it. They're never going to tour again. But the reason I bring up The Who is that, I'm a very obsessive person. I've got OCD and I just tend to obsess on things. which can be good sometimes, bad sometimes. But I used to obsess about The Who, and I used to obsess about the lyrics. Now, this was a very different, remember, I'm talking the 1970s. There was no internet. And, if you wanted to learn something about a band, you bought a book. And sure enough, there was a book about The Who that I bought. The song Bubba O'Reilly, which is one of the most famous Who songs, was actually kind of an ode to his spiritual advisor. Can't remember the dude's name, but he was into an Eastern religion, and that's what that song was about. And I loved that. I loved learning the background of what songs were about. To me, that was everything. And so I just like that. I like the fact that when you work with a songwriter, you can talk about the song. What was it about? What inspired you? That's more the fun side of my job is, talking about lyrics with people. Anyways, long-winded explanation. I say to Carly, I really like working with songwriters. I presumed that she wasn't a songwriter because she was on the Idol show. And she was very quick to correct me and said, well, hold on a second. I am a writer. In fact, I've got a CD of demos. I forgot it today, but I can drop it by your office tomorrow. And I said, okay, cool. Like that. Sure. Why not? So sure enough, she came by the next day. She dropped off a burned CD, which I think I still have somewhere. I'll add that to my eBay fund one day. I think it had at least a couple of the songs that ended up on this album, Tug of War. And they were so good. I wish I could remember which songs. I don't think it was Tug of War, but there was something in there that ended up on the album. But really more the point is I listened to it and went, oh boy, this is good. And that's when it kind of, in my brain, it all kind of came together. I'm like, she's the full package. She can sing, she can write, she can perform, she's intelligent, she's charming, and she is pretty. So we ended up saying yes, we wanted to manage her. And so we managed her initially through the period of Tug of War. Now, Tug of War is her album. We licensed it later, but I remember at the time it was important to her to be her own record label. And I remember asking her, like, why? She had just come off of Canadian Idol. And there was another woman who had been on Idol. And I don't even think she won. Maybe she came in second the year before or something. And she had started her own record label and had done a deal with a company called Maple Music. Carly's like, I want to do that. I want to be my own label. I want to do it that way. So that's how we did it. But I think what she realized was like pretty quickly was, there's a lot of great stuff about being a label, but of course the biggest downside is you're the one who has to spend all the money. And so I think pretty quickly she sort of went, ooh, I don't know about that part. So we got through the cycle and it was a very successful cycle. I think we had 2 or 3 songs in the top 15. I think Tug of War maybe even went top 5. If some of you have not seen some of those videos from that album, you should go check it out. There's a video for Tug of War, which is great. It's honestly one of probably my favorite videos the company's ever made. And I remember it. I remember it was in this weird little apartment that we filmed it, I don't know, on the borderline of Vancouver and Burnaby. And it was Ben Nechtel, who used to work here, and we still do work with Ben. Ben's in Ontario now, but he shot it. Yeah, it did well. And the song did really well. And that was kind of how things started for Carly. That wasn't the only single. There were, I believe, 3 singles. There was Bucket was a single for sure. And we did a fun little video that we shot down at the beach, I remember. Sour Candy is an important song for a bunch of reasons. One is that it was a collaboration between Josh Ramsay from Marianas Trench and Carly. So the Sour Candy video is awesome. It's Josh and Carly like pretending they're in couples therapy, getting into an argument. And it's also a beautiful song. I think it's probably the song that did the least well of the 3 singles, but it was a song that became a fan favorite. And man, Josh and Carly used to sing it together on stage because they toured together a lot. And it was always such a highlight of Carly's set in those early days. When the cycle was over, everybody was quite happy. Carly and her producer, Ryan Stewart, who also was a co-writer, they were nominated for a couple of Junos, as I remember correctly. So you know what? For a first release by an artist, it was very, very successful. And, we were very happy with the results. But then at some point, Carly sort of came to me and said, like, I think I want to sign to the label. I don't think I want to be responsible for all the payments and all the, money. And I think, on the first album, I think I actually ended up spending most of the money anyway. Like, when you manage an artist, you kind of just have to do whatever it takes to make things work. And in that case, it meant I had to put a bunch of my own money into it. And you know what? I don't regret that for a second. Number one, we got the money back. And number two, if you're going to put a bet down, it's always nice for you to put a bet on an artist that ends up having some real success, which needless to say, Carly did. So I'll probably at some point do a podcast about Call Me Maybe. I might get Josh in here, Ramsay. That album is an outlier now in her catalog because it's folky. It's kind of folk pop. And she really became more of a sort of AC, I wouldn't call it an electronic artist, but there's a lot more sort of lushly produced dance tracks. So it really doesn't sound like anything else in her catalog. Now, personally, I love it. I'm not going to say it's better or worse or whatever. I don't look at art that way, but I think it's a great album. I think some of the songs are in there are among the best songs she's written. The song Tug of War itself is gorgeous. And that's probably one reason I love that video so much, just because I love the song so much. Here's a little for you Carly nuts out there. We recorded a whole album that never came out. After Tug of War, we did an album, and that included, she recorded Call Me Maybe, and she recorded Curiosity, which became another big single in Canada. But there was a whole album that was more along the lines of Tug of War. She was starting to get a little more into the production side of things. It wasn't as sort of straightforward production-wise as Tug of War had been, but it was still kind of folky. And we put out Call Me Maybe, and I don't have to tell the world what happened there. That one blew up massively. And then we signed a deal with Interscope. And I remember flying down to LA, and we had a meeting with Jimmy Iovine, who was the head of Interscope, and Carly Kessie from my company, who's still here, was there. And they were like, we need to record a new record because Call Me Maybe was blowing up. It was already very clear that was going to be a big hit. And so they were already wanting to make plans. And I remember saying we have an album. We've got a whole album that we recorded. I don't think we need to go and record, more. That ended up sort of falling on deaf ears. This is maybe a bit of a US major label thing, but I think they always feel like, if you're not working with well-known producers who everybody knows, it can't be any good. And so, to me, the ultimate that just goes to show why that kind of approach makes me crazy is there was a song that we recorded in that record that never got released called Curiosity. Now, what we ended up doing in Canada was releasing an EP. It's still up on all the streaming platforms. Well, I think we still even sell it physically here. And it was called the Curiosity EP. The song Curiosity in Canada became a huge hit. I think it was double platinum. And in the US, I was like, hey, we've already got a single. We don't have to worry about making another song. We've got another single. It's in the can. We've had market research in Canada. It's like a big hit. But that's very much a US major label sort of state of mind. They're like, oh, no. We have to get it redone. We have to get it redone by a well-known producer. So they ended up going with Dallas Austin, and he was the guy who I believe produced all the big TLC hits, Waterfalls, all that stuff. So listen, great producer, but you know what? It wasn't broken. It didn't need to be fixed. And all that ended up happening was he took a song that ended up being a huge single here and turned it into a kind of a mediocre album cut, as far as my opinion goes. Wasn't even a single in the States, which really makes me crazy. I really, looking back, wished we had just put out the album that we had recorded. But that also means for you crazy Carly Rae Jepsen fans out there is unrecorded material or unreleased material. I still listen to it once in a while. I'll put it on just because I like it. Now, some of that came out on the Curiosity EP, but some of it didn't. So there are actually songs that I have on my iTunes from that unreleased album that nobody in the world has heard except me, Kessie, Carly, I guess Ryan Stewart, who produced it, and a few of our staff. But here's something that's, again, some of you Carly Rae Jepsen fans will probably find interesting. And it's something I loved about Carly. She was so dedicated to her art. She would always seek everybody's opinion. We used to have these listening parties at the old 604 office. We had a lounge there, and it was so funny. Like, she'd invite people from the label, but also her family. So like her dad and her mom and her sister and her friends and people from the label. And we would sit in the lounge at the old 604, and she would hand out a pad of little notepad and like pens to everybody. And she really wanted people to write their comments about the songs. So we would sit around, and I remember we did that with Tug of War and with, I think, at least the album that didn't get released. But we sat around 604 playing music and writing notes and talking about it. And I always thought that was kind of cool that she really wanted to get that kind of feedback from the people she was closest to. There was certainly that kind of thought process going on, but it was never contrived. It was never like, oh, this sound is in right now. Definitely there was nothing like that. It was more just like, is this song good? I remember she, as I mentioned, she was nominated for a Juno. She didn't win, but she performed at the gala. At the Juno Awards, there's a gala like the night before the awards ceremony where all the record weasels all get together and, some of the awards are given out that night and there's speeches. But she performed at that. And I remember feeling kind of excited at that point because I got a lot of feedback. I wasn't there. I can't remember. I think they were in Toronto that year. I can't remember. But I remember getting a bunch of emails and texts from people saying, oh boy, you got a good one here. Look, I signed her because I believed in her. So obviously I was excited about her, and you never really know. I'm excited about every artist we sign. I want every artist we sign to be successful. But that was probably the moment for me where I kind of went, oh boy, like the industry's reacting to her. Everybody's reacting to her. So I was pretty excited going into the second album. And when she came to me and said, I want to be on the label, it was great. It was like, okay, you know what? We've worked together now for a couple of years. Like, it feels good. It feels like we have a good working relationship, and let's do it. Let's do it. So I definitely was excited about her. I'd be lying to say I knew what was coming.